Hi, welcome to this part of my guide and review featuring the Solo Adventuring Toolkit. If you haven't seen the other parts of this guide and review, please check out the playlist in the description below. Today we are going to talk about solo approaches, solo play approaches, putting an emphasis on if you should control a single player character or many player characters in your solo sessions. But before we begin, I must tell you that today the Tricube Tales solo rules and deck are currently on sale. I think it's available for 60 cents. So go to DriveThruRPG and consider getting that. And even if you do not want to purchase it, even if you watch this video later on, the complete Tricube solo rules are available for free. Even if you have already downloaded the basic version or the former edition of Tricube Tales, the rules have been upgraded. There are many other pages containing all sorts of things that you can use to set up scenes depending on the environment, the adventure. You just need to click on the publisher preview section of the page. The publisher actually recommends that you can download the rule set for free. But if you purchase it, you're going to get a deck of cards customized that is with graphics and with all of the results in them. They are not necessary to use the complete solo rules, so if you want to purchase that, you would be supporting the publisher. So I highly recommend that you consider that. And remember that there are many discounts in DriveThruRPG because of Cyber Monday. They are going to last all through Cyber Monday. Check out those discounts. Tomorrow they are going to bring out heavy discounts or deep discounts, so definitely check that out. It's a perfect time to purchase those Christmas gifts and perhaps get some gift certificates for a YouTuber that reviews role-playing games and talks about role-playing games in general. So well, let's get started. Solo play approaches. First we have overview and options. I'm going to read some of the key paragraphs to you and then I'm going to give you my opinion on them. So it says here, well, the first thing you might want to decide is what approach you will choose to use. When most people hear solo play in this context, they envision a single player role-playing a single adventurer. That's certainly one option, but there are many others as well, each with its own advantages and disadvantages and quirks. What you want to play is a function of two things. Foremost, your own preferences, of course, but secondly, the resources you have to play. Each of the following approaches is described in this book. So yes, this is an important consideration, because the experience is going to change somewhat dramatically when it comes to bookkeeping and the things that you can do and the approaches to the adventure itself, not just the session overall. So first we have information on one player, one character, referred in this book as OPOC or OPOC. I'm going to say OPOC, so when I say OPOC, it's one player, one character. This is the style that most people assume is meant by solo play. A single player, you, rolls up a single player character and role plays as that character. When it comes to the pros of this approach, is that OPOC is the least complicated approach. It's easy to imagine and envision you are playing a single player character. Similarly, it's the easiest to adapt to. If you've only ever played in the context of a traditional gaming table, or if you plan to join a traditional group adventure and are just starting out. After all, those groups also involve each person running a single character, so it's really the same fundamental concept. It's probably also the speediest approach. Having only a single character means that most encounters are resolved more quickly. So when it comes to pros, I think that the major advantage is that you only need to write down or keep track of a single character sheet. That is, you're going to be writing the experience points, the things that you purchase when you are in the town or city, the things that you obtain in the dungeon, the changes to your stats, to your feats. It depends on the system. But when you are playing with many player characters, that's a bit more complicated. Even if you are the most intelligent and the speediest person around, it is going to take a bit more time, more bookkeeping, and sometimes when you go through those different pages and sheets of the different characters, yes, it can get a bit complicated, to be honest. That's why a lot of people enjoy playing role-playing games, computer role-playing games, such as Baldur's Gate, uh, pretty much any role-playing game, because you can control many characters at the same time and the computer is doing everything for you. Everything related to logistics, keeping track of your equipment, making those rolls. It's just so much easier when compared to tabletop RPGs. That is not to say it's not enjoyable, but some people could consider it a bit tedious. Now let's talk about the cons. This is the most challenging approach. This is because almost every adventure module was created for a party of adventurers, but this is a hurdle that is relatively easy to overcome. You can use systems like the Solo Heroes module that is free by Kevin Crawford. If you are playing a D20 based system, you can use that set of rules and your character is going to feel very powerful and capable. And the Solo Adventuring Toolkit contains many ways to tweak your character so that it's a bit more powerful, more capable in different situations. So there are many ways to overcome this. And there are some role-playing games like any 2D20 based role-playing game, Mutant Chronicles, Conan, Savage Worlds, where you can play with a single player character just as it is, with the system as it is written. And there are some optional rules for some systems as well. In the case of Savage Worlds, in the Beasts and Barbarians core book, or the player's handbook, they give you, well, I don't remember if it's the player's handbook or the game master's guide for that setting. They give you a way to modify or tweak things so you can play as a very powerful hero or character, or even a couple of them quite powerful in the tradition of the Barbarian Brothers, if you remember that film. So let's move on. It says, contrast that with facing such an adventure designed for many, truly solo and alone. The difficulty for such a scenario is much higher than it would be for a typical group of adventurers. This can also be solved, in my opinion, when hiring non-player characters to carry things or to help you with the typical situation that there are two switches and they need to be activated at the same time. If it's a fantasy setting, you could use some spell or summon some creature, it depends, to help you with that other switch. Or you can, like I told you, if you're a fighter or something, hire help to activate the switches at the same time. There are many ways in which you can handle this. And in case of a sci-fi setting where you can purchase an android or a robot or something, so they could activate the switch at the same time, there are many ways to overcome that. And then it says, making an OPOC character can also feel a bit less free and fun than it might normally be. You can't just do whatever you want because it's just you. You have to make sure your player character is at least vaguely competent in a wide array of capabilities, not just specializing in one thing or another. Well, it depends. If you are playing as a melee specialist with no abilities concerning magic or skills, you want to maneuver the situation towards melee combat or ranged combat, even if you are skilled with bows and such. And if you have a character specializing in magic, you also want to keep enemies at bay, use those spells that will protect you, that will shield you while dealing a lot of damage. You could hire non-player characters to serve as tanks for your adventure. And you can take examples from fiction and real life. In fact, maybe it would be a good idea for me to make like a series of videos where I talk about different characters in general that have survived perilous and dangerous ordeals and situations completely on their own with their limited skill set. So it's just about being aware of your strengths and weaknesses and going into situations where your strengths are required and where your weaknesses are never exposed. So here there are other things like you can't really have a dump stat because sooner or later you and only you will be called upon to perform skill checks. It's the same thing, like I said, try not to get into those situations where you are not very proficient. It also says here, it can also feel more lonely. You're role-playing an adventuring party that by its nature can't really have conversations within it, and there's nobody to share information with. Well, not necessarily. For example, you could create a party of adventurers and you could be controlling just one of them, while using the Flex AI guidebook to simulate their artificial intelligence when it comes to combat or tactics. Or perhaps you hire non-player characters, and because first you need to talk with them, you need to contact them, they could be driven by the subsystem in the Flex AI guidebook to handle social situations. Remember that the Solo Adventuring Toolkit also contains a reduced version of that system, and that way you feel a bit like a social interaction, not exactly a complex or deep conversation, but you could simulate that. Now here it also says that because you are controlling a single player character, the death of that player character feels more traumatic. But because this is a game, this is a fictional setting, in my opinion, you just need to take the loss and move on. I have created 2 videos that talk about character death. I'm going to put the links to them in the description below. Maybe you want to watch them because they could offer some insight, or at least my opinion, on how to handle character death. And then we have Quirks and Considerations. So yes, there's a laundry list of drawbacks to the opaque approach, which is why a great deal of this book is dedicated to providing an enormous array of tools. And it says here that there could be some adventures that are outright not feasible to run with a single player character, although because of the tips that I mentioned, it's still doable with spells, depending on the system, robots, hiring non-player characters, etc. Then we have the one player many characters section, or OpMC, I'm going to call it OpMC. So one player creates and directs the actions of 2 or more player characters. So essentially you have a complete party of adventurers and you're controlling every one of them. When it comes to pros, the difficulty is more reasonable and more in line with the original intent of published adventures. That is, because of the skill set, because there is strength in numbers, the power of the party is undeniable, without additional rules. So if we were to take a fictional context, this doesn't mean anything if you compare Conan to a group of bandits or pirates. He could take them all on. Or if you compare them to Solomon Kane, there are many examples. Guyal of Sphere, perhaps, from the Dying Earth. And then, there is no longer a need to design and maintain a character that is a jack of all trades because it's not all resting entirely on the shoulders of that character. There's a great deal of versatility because you can focus more attention on one character than another, and then switch that focus. And there are many other details concerning to the cons of the one player, one character section. For example, you don't take the loss of a death too seriously because you have many player characters at the same time. But what if you become attached to all of them? So I think it's a matter of preferences. And because you are playing as different player characters, different character classes or archetypes, you have that enjoyment. Sometimes when you are playing as a single player character, you feel, well, I am playing as this Avenger sort of character, but now I wish I could play as a sort of Technomancer or a Necromancer or a Paladin, or because now you can enjoy all of those classes as you are playing perhaps 4 or even 6 player characters. Now let's talk about the cons. When you control many player characters, it can be a lot to manage, especially when it comes to character creation and development and keeping track of anything that character goes through, any changes to his inventory, to his persona, anything. I think that is going to be the major drawback for many people that could perhaps decide to play as a single player character, because keeping track of all of those things could be, yes, more trouble than it is worth. So I would recommend that you always play the minimum requirement for an adventure, depending on the system. So for example, if you are playing Hackmaster, maybe you should only play 3 player characters, considering how crunchy the character sheet can get. Only 3 player characters and play as smart and as safe as possible. If you play another system like Savage Worlds, a 2d20 system, or any variation of Dungeons and Dragons, try to use the rules, the optional rules within those systems to make the character more powerful, or use external sources like the tweaks and modifiers included in this Solo Adventuring Toolkit, or external rule set, like I said, the Solo Heroes rule set, optional rules from Beasts and Barbarians. If you play Pathfinder, there are some things that can make your character extremely powerful, like I don't remember the name of those. It's been a while since I've used those boons points or something like that. That they are kind of like fate points. They allow you to modify some rolls and to save yourself from death. You could also use the Mythic Adventures book to make your character quite mythic from the start, and use a character generation system like a point buy system to create a strong character from the very start with the stats that are quite high, quite potent. And then we have Quirks and Considerations of Up MC, or One Player Many Characters. It's worth noting that for some players, character creation and leveling up and tracking loot and managing gear is a major attraction to the game, so there are some players that actually enjoy this. And that's basically it. Later on, they just give you a summary or like a conclusion to this particular subsection of the book, and they give you some examples of video game role-playing games, such as Final Fantasy, Skyrim, Fallout, etc. So yes, it's all about your preferences. In my opinion, I always play with a single player character as often as possible, because it saves so much time when it comes to bookkeeping. And if you need help during an adventure, you can always hire non-player characters, or perhaps you encounter them during your journeys. It's not that difficult. But if you really want to play with many characters at the same time, keep them at a minimum. Perhaps just 2 or 3, at most 4. That's my recommendation, because bookkeeping can become a chore. Now, this is not to say that there aren't people who enjoy that, and if you are patient, if you don't want to rush things, yes, there is no hurry. Take your time going through a character sheet. Oh, this character picked up this weapon, now he has this many gold pieces. Okay, moving on to the next character. This other character gained a new spell, he lost this many hit points, etc. It's all about your pace, what you enjoy. If you feel like a solo session is becoming too tedious, change the way you are playing it. Change the way you are handling things. So thank you for watching this part of the guide and review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. And remember that there is that sale right now in DriveThruRPG of Cyber Monday and all of that. And definitely check out the Tricube Tales solo system. I think it's a great system on its own, but it could also work as a companion for the Solo Adventuring Toolkit, especially when it comes to building scenes. There are many things covering adventures in the wilderness, at sea, in the city, in the dungeon. It can perfectly complement the material in the Solo Adventuring Toolkit. So thank you so much to those of you that have been supporting the channel by sending DriveThruRPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you and see you later.